Good afternoon, everyone. Today, we are going to go ahead and dive into the lesson called Shared Attributes of Quadrilaterals. Now, you might be asking yourself, what exactly is a shared attribute of a quadrilateral? Well, if I have two different quadrilaterals right here, let's just say I have my square and I have my parallelogram. And you know that this also can be our rhombus. What we can do is we need to go ahead and figure out what are the actual attributes of each of these shapes, okay? So if I take a look at my square first, okay? If I look at my square, and I find out right now that my square, we know one of the attributes is that it has four right angles. That's pretty simple right there, four right angles, okay? We also know that my square has not just one, but two sets of parallel sides. Two sets parallel sides. Okay? I also should notice that my square, that all four sides are the same. All four sides are equal. Okay? So those are my attributes of my square. Now let's take a look at my attributes of my parallelogram and my rhombus. Well, first off, we should know that our parallelogram has not one, but two sets of parallel sides. We should also know that our rhombus, not the parallelogram necessarily, but the rhombus, that all four sides are equal. Okay? We should know also that there are no right angles in our parallelogram and rhombus. So now what they want us to do is they want us to figure out what are the shared attributes. Now remember, attributes, that means sides and angles that make up our shape, that make up our polygon. And shared means we're going to say the same. Okay? So now what we have to do is we have to look at the same sides and angles for both figures. All right? So now let's take a look then at our square and then compare it to our parallelogram and rhombus. Again, we know that our square has four right angles. So think to yourself, is that shared by the parallelogram and rhombus? Does the parallelogram and rhombus have four right angles? We should know that it does not. So this is not a shared attribute, meaning these two not share attributes. They do not share the same sides or angles. So now let's go down to two sets of parallel sides. Does the square with two sets of parallel sides share that attribute with our parallelogram and rhombus? Does the parallelogram and rhombus have two sets of parallel sides? Well, we should know that yes, it does. So this is a shared attribute, two sets of parallel sides. Let's take a look at then all four sides being equal in our square. Is that a shared attribute for a parallelogram and rhombus? Well, here's where it gets interesting. For the parallelogram, not necessarily, because the parallelogram does not have all four sides being equal. But the rhombus has all four sides being equal. We should know that by now, that a rhombus has all four sides being the same. So in the case of the rhombus in the square, that is a shared attribute. Okay? So that's what I mean when I say shared attributes. So now let's go ahead and apply that to page 859. Go ahead and get out page 859 if it's not out already. I'll go ahead and wait for you. All right. So let's take a look what it says about this diagram here. It says the diagram, meaning down here, this diagram down here, shows how quadrilaterals are related. I mean, how are they the same? How are they the same? What attributes are shared by both rectangles and squares? So they're asking us, again, attributes. They're asking us about how are the sides and angles, how are they shared, meaning how are they the same by both rectangles, here's our rectangle, and squares. Here's our square. So we want to know, how are these two shapes, what kind of attributes, sides and angles, do these two shapes share with each other? And that's what we're going to dive into a little bit, okay? So now, let's go ahead and take a look down a little bit below. Just for now, we're going to go ahead and skip down below this diagram. We're going to go ahead and read the question, read what it says. It says rectangles, here's our rectangle, and squares share the following attributes, okay? Sides, angles, sharing them, how are they the same? Okay, just get that in your head right now. So let's take a look. Opposite sides are the same. Well, opposite sides are the same one. Let's go up and take a look at what makes up a rectangle, okay? It tells us in a rectangle that all the attributes of a parallelogram plus 4 right angles. But wait a minute, it doesn't say anything about sides. But what it does say is it says all the attributes of parallelogram. So what we have to do is we have to come back over here. Notice I have a dotted line over to parallelograms. So here's our parallelogram. Let's see what it says about opposite sides. Opposite sides are the same length. Hey, that gives us an idea of what they're asking for. Now let's come down to a square just to make sure we're on the right page here, because we want to make sure that our square and our rectangle share the same attributes there. So now our square, it says all the attributes of a parallelogram. It says 4 sides are the same length and 4 right angles. Okay? So opposite sides are the same. We know the opposite sides are the same length. Okay? Because all the attributes of a parallelogram. So we come back up here to parallelogram. There we go with all the attributes of a parallelogram. Go ahead and take a few minutes to get that word length in there. Okay. Now, let's take a look at this next one. It says both pairs of blank sides are parallel. So again, when we come up here to our rectangle, let's look what it says. It says all the attributes of a parallelogram plus 4 right angles. So again, we're going to come up here to the parallelogram, and we want to find out about both pairs of blank sides are parallel. Okay, we've already taken care of opposite sides of the same length. Now it says both pairs of opposite sides are parallel. That sounds promising. Again, let's go to the square. We want to make sure that the square shares the same attributes. And again, it says all of the attributes of the parallelogram. So we take our square, and we go to the parallelogram, and we know that both pairs of opposite sides, both pairs of opposite sides are parallel. Go ahead and get that in. And finally, if you want to take a look, it says there are blank right angles. Again, let's come up to the rectangle. Let's see what it says about the rectangle. 4 right angles. Let's take a look again. We want to share it with the square. 4 right angles. These are the attributes that your square and your rectangle share, so you could say there are 4 right angles. So right here, what we just did there, we listed the attributes that are the same in the rectangle and the square, which is what the question asks us. What attributes are shared by rectangles and squares? Okay, that's kind of the I can statement right now. All right, let's go ahead and turn the page and continue. Right, the next question says, it's kind of a big one, so bear with me. A parallelogram has opposite sides that are the same length. Both pairs of opposite sides are parallel. So we know that this side and this side are the same length. And we know that this side and this side are the same length. Okay? These little slashes, by the way, simply mean that these two equal each other. We also know that these sides are parallel with each other, and these sides are parallel with each other. That's what they're saying. That's basically what was just said in this sentence right here. Okay? Now, get all that out of the way. Let's continue what it says. It says it also has opposite angles that are the same size. If we look here, here's an angle, and we go diagonal to this angle. These two angles are the same. And if we look at this angle, and its opposite angle over here, these two angles are the same as well. It says draw an example of a quadrilateral, so a four-sided figure. We're going to draw a four-sided figure that is not a parallelogram. So this is going to take a little bit of thinking. We want to think to ourselves, what's a four-sided figure that is not a parallelogram? So what we have to do is we have to go back to that other page. Let's go back to the other page and look and see what is not a parallelogram. I want you to notice something. Notice the word parallelogram, and I want you to notice the dotted lines that it's attaching itself to. Notice how it attaches itself to a rhombus, because a rhombus is a parallelogram. How it attaches itself to a square, because a square is a parallelogram. It attaches itself to a rectangle, because a rectangle is a parallelogram. It even connects itself to a quadrilateral, because quadrilaterals can be parallelograms. What is the only shape, the only quadrilateral that the dotted line to the parallelogram right here is not being connected to? If you look, you'll notice that the trapezoid is not connected, because a trapezoid only has one pair of parallel lines. The parallelogram has two pairs. So let's go ahead and take that information and apply it down here. So they want us to draw an example of that quadrilateral. Let's go ahead and draw our trapezoid. Now I'm going to go ahead and draw our sets of parallel lines here. Here's our sets of parallel lines. Now what I need to do is I need to make sure that my other two lines are not parallel. So there's that. Now I got to think to myself, what kind of line can I draw to make sure that these will not cross each other? That these will cross each other. Right there. We have only one set parallel lines. Now we have to classify the quadrilateral, and we know that it is a trapezoid. So let's go ahead and put that word trapezoid in there. We need to explain why it is not a parallelogram. Well, we found out earlier that it has one set of parallel lines. Only one set of parallel lines. Okay? Now, let's go ahead and take a look at our guided practice down here. We're almost done with this video. Just bear with me here, okay? Number one, it says name one attribute, meaning a side or an angle. Remember, attributes are side, angle, that a square has, that a rhombus does not have. All right? So to do this, we got to go back to that other page. Okay? We're going to be flipping back and forth between those pages quite often. We're looking for a square and a rhombus. All right? Just erase all this stuff. Okay? Let's take a look at our square. Let me just move it down just a little bit. Here's our square and our rhombus. Now we're going to look and see what attribute is not shared by these two. So we know that all the attributes of a parallelogram and all the attributes of a parallelogram, these two are shared by each other. We know that they both have four sides of the same length, but let's look at one last thing in the square. Notice right here, the square has four right angles, but does a rhombus have four right angles? And we should say that no, it doesn't. So there's our answer. We know that the square has four right angles and a rhombus does not. So let's go ahead and put that in for number one. Four right angles. Now, number two, it tells us to draw an example of a quadrilateral that is not a rhombus. Okay? We have to draw a quadrilateral that is not a rhombus. So, just like before, let's go back to the other page. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to draw a quadrilateral that is not this rhombus right here. Okay? So we need to draw a quadrilateral that does not have four sides the same length and does not have the attributes of a parallelogram. All right? So my suggestion is again, let's just look over and see what doesn't have four sides the same length. Well, we know that a rectangle doesn't have four sides the same length. We know that some parallelograms do not have four sides the same length. And we know that trapezoids do not have four sides the same length. So what you're going to do is you're going to take one of these shapes, either the trapezoid, the parallelogram, or the rectangle, and you're going to go ahead and draw that in for number 2. So you're going to go ahead and draw one of those shapes. Pick which one you want. I'll leave it up to you. After you're done drawing your quadrilateral in here, then what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and classify it. Tell me what is its name, and tell me why it is not a rhombus. And that's what I'm going to be checking for today, okay? All right, this is a little bit of a longer video, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for keeping with me, and I will talk to you later.